Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to this session on Hanoch Levin in the world. We have a lot of materials to share with you and so much to discuss, but before we get to all that, I'd like to introduce all our panelists today and ask them to tell you very briefly, for context, how their work connects to that of Hanoch Levin's and what they feel about it. So I'll go first and tell you I'm Evan Fallenberg, and I have co-translated with one of our other panelists, Jessica Cohen, 5 of Hanoch Levin's plays, and was the artistic director of a week-long translation residency devoted to his work at Mishkenot She'ananim in Jerusalem last year. To me, Hanoch Levin belongs to that very small and precious group of writers whose work offers up new aspects every time I encounter it. There always seem to be more and more riches hiding inside it. So our participants this evening are, first of all, Noam Semel, director of Habima National Theater and chair of the Hanoch Levin Institute of Israeli Drama. And Noam, briefly, for context, tell us about your connection to Hanoch Levin.
I began to work with Hanoch Levin when I was a commercial producer, when Levin started his career, and he used to do his plays at the Haifa Municipal Theater at that time, and in a small cabaret or in a fringe venue in Tel Aviv. And I exposed the productions to the other parts of Israel, including parts of Tel Aviv. Anyhow, he came to me and he gave the plays to me, and I tried to make out of them success. During my career as Director General of the Haifa Municipal Theater and the Kameri Theater of Tel Aviv, I think I led more than 20 different productions by Levin, that most of them has been directed by him. I did with him his last production, Requiem, that he wrote, inspired by 3 short stories by Chekhov and directed. Then he was dying, and I allowed him to do his last play in the hospital. So he did the production for my theater, the Kameri Theater of Tel Aviv, since the last moment of his life. We were friends, but theater friends. And I feel like he was like a brother. I appreciate very much his commitment. He is the only theater director that I know that has never left the production. When he directed a play at the Kameri Theater of Tel Aviv, he used to escort all the performances all around the country and abroad. He said, if my actors are on stage, I am behind them, I am with them, even when he was dying. And we said about him that he was the poet of the stage. I said tonight, he was the poet of the human being.
Noam, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction to Hanoch. Roni Toren, stage designer for theater and opera productions throughout Europe, Asia, and North America, including many plays by Hanoch Levin. Recently, Requiem in China. Good evening, Roni.
Hi, good evening. I met Hanoch in 1983, I think. It was some 10 years after Hanoch himself started directing his own plays, for those who do not know, because before, when he just started, other directors directed his plays. Around 72, he started directing his own plays, and he just called me. I was a very young designer. He just called me. He was looking for a designer for a new production. It was his 11th production. It was his own version for Aristophanes' The Women of Troy. He wrote The Lost Women of Troy. He was looking for a designer. He offered me to join, and I joined him for many years. I designed costumes and sets for his productions, but also for his plays directed by other directors, like that one you mentioned, Requiem, directed by my friend and colleague Yair, who is with us tonight, and with an Israeli team. We created in China, in Beijing, a new version of Requiem, July 19th. And I miss him. I miss him as a colleague. I miss him as a writer, but mostly I miss him as a director. I think he's not underestimated, but mostly talked about as a writer, but not much is mentioned about his work as a director. And I miss him a lot around being a wonderful, outstanding director.
Thank you, Hanoch. Yair Shelman, theater director for a number of Hanoch Levin plays, including Requiem in China, and winner of Best Director, Best Play, and Best Actor for the Constant Mourner production in Belarus in 2016. Good evening, Yair.
Hi, good evening. So I'm 36 years old. I think I met Hanoch Levin, or I met Hanoch Levin through his work, Requiem, which Noam just mentioned. I was 16 years old. I was a theater kid. We went like a theater major class to see the show in Jerusalem, where I grew up. I remember watching this show. It was like a moment where I realized that theater is where I belong and where I want to invest my life in. And 20 years later, I directed the same show or the same play which I saw when I was a teenager, Requiem in China, with Ronnie, my friend and colleague who just spoke, and also Noam came to see the show in China. We saw it together. So far, I directed 5 different plays of Hanoch Levin, and hopefully more to come.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yair.
Thank you.
Ari Folman, director of recently The Constant Mourner last season in Tel Aviv, and of course, a filmmaker, a Golden Globe Award winner for Waltz with Bashir. Good evening, Ari.
Good evening. First, I want to strengthen what Ronnie just said about Hanoch as a director. I was recently in a panel in London in regards of Hanoch, and they were discussing a lot about his playwriting, but I think he was an incredible director also. The stages that he made and conducted were, I've never seen anything like it. And also I think that the more he grew up as a director, the better he became to be something outstanding. So it's much more than that. It's funny because in a way I am, this is my life, but I try to remember on the way here how many films I saw in the cinema with my parents as a kid, and there was barely one, and it was Oliver Twist, very depressing one, because in my house, cinema was considered entertainment, and culture was only theater, opera, and ballet. And we spent many years in London and Bristol and in the States, and they never took us to the movies. So this is why probably I became a filmmaker. But I remember when we came back from one spell, I saw in the Haifa Theater Kum. This was my first one. And I was pretty shocked because I grew up in this small Polish community of Holocaust survivors that I think all of them had a battery here that was charged with guilt. And whenever the guilt was done, they were looking for another. And when I saw Kum, I felt at home. And right afterwards, there was another production of Sheets. Sheets was right afterwards in Haifa. And then I started following it because I felt there is coming world. I feel it. And I feel now really lucky to have directed the Constant Mourner in the Camry. We had only 11 shows before the first lockdown on March, for a while, let's say. But, it could have been worse. We could have finished all the rehearsals and perform at all. So I look at it this way.
Great. Thank you, Ari. We'll come back to that, definitely.
Yeah.
And Jessica Cohen, translator, Man Booker Prize winner with David Grossman for A Horse Walks into a Bar. Good evening to you.
Hi, good evening. So as Evan mentioned, I co-translated with Evan several of Hanoch Levin's plays over the past, 3 years or so. But I actually, the work of Hanoch Levin's that I translated was prose. That's how I kind of got into him. I mean, growing up in Israel, I obviously knew about him as, from his theater work and had seen a couple of things, but I'm a reader more than I am a theater goer. And he has some really phenomenal works of prose that are unlike anything else. And one of the very first things I translated was a novella of his. And this was actually shortly before he died. And I later managed to get it published. So then kind of 20 some years later, coming around to translating his plays was an interesting process for me, because I feel like his prose is what kind of lived in me all those years. But translating his plays, I think what draws me to him and what I think typifies a lot of his work is how incredibly grounded his characters are in the here and now and in the physicality of their own bodies and their surroundings. Everything's very physical. And yet, every so often, there are these incredibly sublime moments where they really transcend all of this earthy, often filthy kind of physical existence, and are able to get to this whole other kind of existential insight about their lives and about our lives. And that's what I enjoy about his plays.
Super, thank you. Thanks to all of you for getting us started and giving an idea of who this amazing man was. I'm guessing that everyone watching this session has some idea about who Hanoch was, and you certainly got a little bit more from all of our panelists this evening. But just to make sure that we're sort of all on the same page about this, we have a clip about Hanoch and his work to show you. So we're going to get started with that right now. And this is kind of an overview of his work. I would like to remind the audience that you are invited to ask questions via the question and answer mechanism in this session. And I'd also like to remind the panelists that when we talk after the film, I'll be sort of running things, but I'm happy for you to jump in because you have worked so much either with one another or on the same shows that we're talking about that don't feel you have to wait to be called on. So please enjoy the following clip.
ב-11 דקות הצלחנו להשמיד, לחסל, להפיץ, לרמוס, לרסק, לחתוך, לקצץ, לפצפץ ולמוך את אויבינו.
הקהל בעיניי הוא יריב והתיאטרון התמודדות בוקס בין הבמה והאולם. אני רוצה לתת להם מכות, להראות להם כמה הם רעים. הסאטירות שלו זעזעו את הקהל, הצבנו את הצנזורים, הרתיחו את הפוליטיקאים. הוא מתח את גבולות חופש הביטוי הישראלי עד לקצה ואז הגדיר אותם מחדש.
הוא רצה להגיד לאנשים, לא יכול להיות שילד יישן בלילה עם שני הורים, ואתה תבוא ותחסה לו את השמיכה, ותראה אותו ישן וחולם, שזה אחד הרגעים הקסומים שיש במין האנושי, ובאותו רגע תיפול פצצה ותהרוג את הילד ואת המשפחה. מה אתם עושים?
הרואה את המתים, אין לו מילים להגיד. הוא הולך הצידה, הוא ממשיך לחיות כמי שהפסיד. זאת אומרת, למות במלחמה צודקת, לא בשבילי, תודה רבה. אני רוצה לחיות, צודק או לא, בבית מחכים לי שעבור.
חנוך לוין, אתה רואה שהקהל נגדך. איך אתה מגיב?
לא מפריע לי.
לא אכפת לך מה תגובתו של הקהל.
לא.
אתה לא כתבת בשביל להרגיז את הקהל?
אני כתבתי, מה להרגיז? אני יודע להרגיז. כתבתי.
אתה העלית בדעתך שזה יעורר תגובות נזעמות, לפחות אצל חלק מהצופים.
לא, אני שלפני, בחזרות האחרונות חשבתי שזה יכול להיות די פושר.
היית רוצה שכל האבות ישקלו את בניהם, שלא יראה חיוך על שום שפתיים, והמילה לשמוח תיעלם.
אף אחד לא העז לפניו לעשות את זה בצורה כזאת.
כאן יש מחזאי שבאופן ברור רואים שהוא תופס קהל בצורה בלתי רגילה ושהוא גורם לקהל להגיב.
יושב ראש המועצה לביקורת מחזות יהושע יוסטמן, האם אדוני אתה תתלונן על העלאת ההצגה אמש?
זה ברור שעברו עבירה והתוגש תביעה נגדם.
אם לא תקבל אישור להציג אותה באולמות, איפה תעשה זאת?
נמצא עולם מתחת לאדמה.
כל המקומות, המחשבות, הרגשות האפלים, המוצנעים, המגוחכים, הקטנוניים אצל בני אדם, שאנשים מעזים לחלוק רק בינם לבין עצמם, ולפעמים גם את זה לא. חנוך לוין מאיר אליהם בפנס חד וחריף ונוקב, מלא הומור, מלא סאטירה, מלא סרקזם ומלא חמלה אנושית.
מה לי ולבשר הזה המצפצף עכשיו מתוך שינה שלווה, רואה בחלום נופים רחוקים שאני לא כלול בהם? מי עשה שבעודי ילד קטן נשרח ברחוב אחרי אבי, כבר באיזה צומת בעתיד תחכה לי אישה זרה שאין לי כלום איתה ולה אין כלום איתי, ואיזה דבק לא נראה אבל חזק משנינו ידביק אותנו זה לזה לנצח.
אני בת 6. אני יכולה קצת לי בחוץ, אבל זה רק הטיח. ותפסיקו ללדת כל כך הרבה ילדות חדשות. הן גדלות ומקבלות שדיים. הן לוקחות את השדיים שלי ואת האור שלי ומשתמשות בהם בלי לשלם לי.
חיים את החיים והכל בסדר, ואז מתים באמצע המרק.
קשה להסביר את עוצמת התגובה של הקהל. הם הרימו את תקרת הבטון של צוותא.
חנוך לוין הפך למחזאי קלאסי. אתה לוקח מחזה שנכתב לפני 30 שנה, ואתה לא רק מגלה שהוא יכול להיות רלוונטי, הוא יותר רלוונטי היום ממה שהוא היה פעם.
Do you have this feeling that you see something that you've never seen before? A whole new language, a new form, a new existential point of view, a new political point of view. His themes are so universal, you just couldn't resist it.
He has this sense of humor with the world's realities. And he has this talent to reconciliate theater with the audience. He's very close to regular people.
בעולם שלנו צוחק זה שעוד לא בוכה.
In early March, in one of the final public events before the pandemic turned our world upside down, the National Theatre hosted an evening of readings and discussion in celebration of a 3-volume anthology of Hanoch's plays published this year in English by Oberon in London. David Land, former artistic director of the Young Vic, moderated the event, calling Hanoch himself the modern world on stage and saying that we badly need to hear what he has to say. This was the panel that Ari referred to and he was a part of. So, and you can see that there on your screens now. Noam, I think you're the right person to tell us about Hanoch in the world, with probably the best grasp of the scope of his work internationally, and also his the politics, the politics of his plays and what they meant then and what they mean now.
I shall start with Hanoch Levin in the world. When Hanoch Levin was alive, He didn't care about the translation. He didn't care about the fact that his play will be produced by somebody in New York or by somebody in Paris or in London. And it was, most of the productions were very lousy. The translation was not good, and the acting was not, anyhow, it was not professional. And there was an image as if Hanoch Levin is very local, Israeli, provincial. By the way, most of the Israeli theater critics came to the conclusion that Hanoch Levin is a very, very local Israeli playwright or director, but not a worldwide artist. Then, when he passed away in 1999, I came to the conclusion that Hanoch Levin has to be around the world because he's so big. And he did the Requiem, as I told you before, and Requiem was invited to Athens by the National Theatre of Greece in Athens, and all the elite of Greece came to see the production, including the very well-known filmmaker Angelopoulos, and the composer Theodorakis, and Glikeria, the singer, and some poets and some writers, and the response was great. And then we were invited with Requiem all around the world in Europe, not in America, not in Australia, not in Canada. America, Europe, and then China. Europe and China, that's all. Europe and China, but all around Europe. Then South America. I think that Requiem, the production that was written by Levin and directed by Levin, penetrated or paved the way to the interest in his drama. Then the translations. The translation that has been done by Jessica Cohen and by you and by some other people, we came to the conclusion that the best translators in the world of Hanoch Levin should be poets, because he was a poet. He was more than a playwright. He was a poet. And when we gave the translation to a poet, a Greek poet, it was great. When we gave it to an Hungarian poet, it was great. When we gave it to a Polish poet, it was great. And we were in all these countries, Germany and Russia and Poland and Czech Republic, in all the festivals. It was the highlight of every festival with Requiem. Then people asked for material. In the year 2001, we did the first marathon exposure, which is, by the way, was the first step of this IsraDrama. We did a special exposure of Hanoch Levin, only Hanoch Levin. And his death was covered by the New York Times, 2 pages. Why? Because of what you have shown in the film about his involvement in politics. He was very courageous. He was very talented, but very courageous. He wrote the satirical cabaret in 1969 against the government of Israel, against the generals of Israel, against Moshe Dayan, the big shot, the big minister of defense of Israel. He spoke about the human being. He spoke about the dead soldiers and the dead Arabs that were killed in the war. And it caused a lot of antagonism, and there were riots and there were demonstrations against the production that was done at the Camry Theater of Tel Aviv, that that time was led by a collective. And the collective voted after 13 performances to close the production. He mentioned it in the movie. Then he was very courageous to do a play, satirical cabaret, during the Lebanon War called The Patriot. And then in 1997, maybe we can show while I shall talk about murder. In 1997, Bibi Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister of today, was elected the first time to be the prime minister. And he decided to open the tunnels around the Wailing Wall in Old Jerusalem. And when after he decided to open the tunnels, there were riots, and hundreds of Palestinians were killed, and tens of Israelis were killed in clashes. And Hanoch Levin decided to do a demonstration of artists. And he asked playwrights and writers and painters and filmmakers, and nobody came, except one Israeli woman playwright and my wife, the late Nava Semel, who was a playwright and novelist and poetess. And a day later, he called her early in the morning in Saturday, and he said to me, "Can I speak to Nava?" I said, why? She's asleep. He said, because I would like to demonstrate now this evening in the gates of Habima, in the gates of the Camera Theater, the two major buildings of theaters in Tel Aviv. And I said to him, Hanoch, your greatness is to write, not to demonstrate. Who will give a damn on your demonstration? After 10 weeks, he came to our theater, the Camera Theater of Tel Aviv, that I led during that period with Omri Nitzan, artistic director, and he came with a play that the name of the play was Murder. But there were three names: murder in Hebrew, murder in English, and murder in Arabic, Qatal. And this was a play about the blood circle of our life here in Israel. We kill the Palestinians kill us. We see now a Palestinian father who is seeing 3 Israeli soldiers that has killed his son, who killed an Israeli soldier, and they are torturing him. And then he wants to take revenge. So a few weeks later on, he comes to the seashore of Jaffa or Tel Aviv and kill a groom and a bride. Innocent people, Jewish innocent people. But he speaks about, during this production or during this drama, he speaks about the bloodshed. He speaks about about this country, about this territory, about this land, and about the people. And the people, you can see here the groom and the bride. You can see it on the screen. And they will be killed now by the Palestinian father who is taking revenge because 3 Israeli soldiers killed his son, because they thought that his son is the one who killed one of their friends. So it's killing and killing and killing and killing. And Hanoch Levin was, in a way, a prophet. And when there was a discussion when the production will be done, and he said, I cannot direct it. When he gave us the script, I said, why can you? He said, I am doing another play, The Whore from Ohio, a very small play, and I cannot work on 2 productions. He used to do 1 production in a year. That's it, as a director. So Omri Nitzan, the director, offered himself, and he said, okay, Omri Nitzan, you will direct it, the artistic director of the theater. And I insisted on that it will be done immediately. And Omri said, I need 9 months to work on it. It's poetry. I have to find a way how to put it on stage. So Hanoch Levin said to me and said, listen, don't worry. 9 months from now, it will be relevant even more. And he was right. Relevancy. Relevancy.
Yes, definitely. And that's something we need to talk a little bit more about, I think, the relevancy. So I think it's pretty much obvious to everyone why this is relevant in Israel today. What about relevant for the world, relevant for theaters around the world? How do you see not only Murder, but some of his other political plays like Queen of the Bathtub or Patriot? How relevant are they for the world stage?
The political drama by Levin is not translated well into other countries in Europe or Asia or South America. The best productions of Levin today are like Krum, that we saw, Warlikowski, the Polish great director from Novi Theater in Warsaw, or it was done in South America. Hanoch Levin wrote 60 plays, 35, how many plays? Something 36. Let's say 33% of them were political, 33% of them were, we call it mythological, based on the Bible or based on the Greek drama, and 33%, more or less, were about the bourgeois, about the human life, about the couples, about the family, about the missing of the opportunity, the missing of the opportunity. He speaks about the missing of the opportunity of the human being. And these productions, these plays all around the world are very successful. It depends on the translation. But I want to raise a question to the public or a question to the panel, because Hanoch Levin is not done in America, not in Canada, and not in Australia. These are the only, I'm saying that they are provincials. I know that you speak from America, and I know that Jessica Cohen speaks from America, but I'm saying maybe they are provincial, or maybe they believe in the phrase, all you need is $1 and a dream. And Hanoch Levin is the opposite, if all you need is $1 and a dream. So I don't know. I do not have the answer. but I can raise the question why Hanoch Levin is not produced all around, including England. They did a wonderful event, thanks to Lilian Barreto, the widow of Levin, and the legacy of Levin, and Ari Fullman that participated in it. And I did 20 years ago a co-production with the National Theatre in London. They read play by Hanoch Levin. They read Murder with very good actors. And they don't do Hanoch Levin. They don't do at the National, they don't do in Bristol, they don't do in Liverpool, they do not do Hanoch Levin. The only countries they do Hanoch Levin mainly are France, Hungary, Czech Republic, Russia, and Poland. In Poland tonight, if there wouldn't be the sickness or what we are facing now, every night until the middle of March, every night in Poland, 20 different plays by Levin on stage all around Poland. Only in Poland, between 10 and 20 different plays every night. And as I mentioned before, Hungary and the Czech Republic and Slovenia and Slovakia and Greece and Italy and France. Mainly Europe and South America and China. China only. Japan, only one production. South Korea, one production. That's it.
So Noam, you prepared a short clip for us about the different productions around the world, but I want to manage the time well here. So I think that maybe we'll come back to that because you've given such a good overview. I think we'll come back to that a little bit later. And I'd like to move on to Yair and Roni, who were recently involved in the production of Requiem in China. Yair, you have a film clip about Requiem, and we have some photos that Roni is going to talk us through. So I think it would be a good idea, Roni, if you would like to, Yair, if you'd like to say a few words about what we're going to see, and then we'll go right to the clip.
Sure. We're going to see a short video, like a trailer from the production we did last year of Requiem in China. It was a co-production between Israeli creators, myself as a director, and a team of designers, including Roni Toren, and all Chinese production and cast. We had two really strong leading actors, Chinese actors, Nida Hong and Lao Sun. All of the rehearsal process took place in China. I went to Beijing, I think, maybe a couple of times, if not 3 times before previous of the rehearsals for auditions. After we had the full cast, I stayed in Beijing for a couple of months. The Israeli team came with me for the first week to plan ahead, and then they went back to Israel and came back to China, to Beijing, for about 2 weeks before the premiere. I have to say it was an incredible opportunity and process working on this beautiful text written in Hebrew but translated to Chinese. I mean, maybe it's not obvious, but I do not speak Chinese. And being able to understand one another, myself and the Chinese actors, through the text was just, I think, easier than expected, thanks to the writing of Levin, which is so universal and so poetic and understandable, but still abstract in some sense. Should we maybe show the video and look at it as we go? I think it will be nice to be able to address it. For me, the work on this text in a different language was something that was really, here we go, was really incredible. here you can see Nida Hong and the rest of the actors. I think what Levin offers me as a director is to really talk about theater and the love for theater and life and death all together. I think all of his work is talking also about theater in a meta-theater kind of way, and this is always something I try to bring to the stage when I direct it. It's circus and theater and life and death and grotesque and poetic all coming together. Ronnie, I would love to hear a little bit maybe from you as we go on this video.
Sorry. Okay, just to add on top of what Noam just said, I still remember the days early in the 90s when I was working with Hanoch. And at that time, parallel to that, I was working in London with some major prominent directors. And I said to Hanoch, please do give me a translation to one of your plays. I can have the contacts to pass it on to directors in London. He said, forget about it. It won't work. I'm not interested. And at that time, it seemed like impossible, really, as Noam said, to transfer a play by Hanoch into another culture, to another language. It seemed like Hanoch knew the best, and why should we argue with him? And when it came to the moment where Yair came with this proposal, amazing proposal to recreate a requiem, at the beginning, it was quite like an impossible mission. One should remember or notice that Requiem in Israel, the production that Hanoch himself directed and opened in 1999, just before he died, stayed on due, and thanks to Noam, it was performed since then till now, all the time. Generations grew on that production, and it kept on traveling around the world, as Noam said, including China. I think it visited 4 times or 3 times. So when we came to that moment to redesign or rethink or recreate this production, it was quite impossible. How can we recreate a perfect, to come on with a new production to this perfect play and perfect production? By the way, Eugenie, our producer, who kept this idea to remake this production in China, as far as I know, as far as she told us, Yael, correct me if I'm wrong, she had an idea, just before you go to the pictures, she had the idea to create it with Chinese director, and she addressed several directors, and no one could think of going to touch this holy text for them. The Chinese love this text. So at the end, she came to Yair and to us, and we were about to create it. And it was quite impossible to think. By the way, this picture now we are watching is the first, just if you can hold on this picture back. This picture is the first reading of the play with the Chinese actors. We didn't know them, and they hardly knew us. And I've worked with Yair for a few months on preparing this production. We couldn't even imagine how it would sound in Chinese. As Yair said, we don't know Chinese, and they don't know Hebrew. They read it in Chinese. We know the play. And I remember I was sitting in that room, and for all of a sudden, I found myself crying. I found myself so moved by actually hearing Hanoch play in Chinese, and they were moved to tears as well. And it was quite a miracle that his words managed to transfer and cross countries and seas and get to another culture, another language, and still work. And it was a magic. It was really a magic. So we had quite a problem to recreate Requiem. This is the model. And we had to get rid of the old production and reinvent a new production. And we were thinking, we were talking quite a lot whether we should address the Chinese, this is the workshop we were working in, whether we should address the Chinese public with their own language, aesthetic language, or should we create our language? What should be transferred? What should be kept? And I think at the end we found, this is the Israeli team, creative team, they're working together. We found that at the bottom line, Hanoch writes, as he said, in an international language. It's a human language, and it is theater. He writes mainly for the theater, and it's always remained theater. So when this is the willow tree. There is a scene in Requiem that's happening in the original play under the willow tree. And when we created it, we didn't know how we can transfer the willow tree to China. And only when Yair went to the rehearsals, he discovered that Beijing is full of willow trees. And so the willow tree became like a common image that we could hear, an abstract image, but it was easily understood by the Chinese. There was no need to translate it. So a theater is a theater and a theater, and for Hanoch, it works everywhere. I think this is the last one, or is there another one? No, that's the text, the Chinese text. I think that's us measuring the rehearsal room. And this is the model, traveling to China. We started, yes, this is one of the sketches we started. And actually we dealt not with China or Israel, we dealt with the human travel, the human life, traveling through life. This was the main image for our production. Yes, this is the stage at the last moment. Yes. Anything else, Yair, you want to add on top of what I've just described?
I think maybe what I would like to add is also following what Noam said before. I think a lot of times I hear that how can you direct or how can you present Hanoch Levin abroad? It's so, the writing is so Israeli or it's so Jewish. And I think me coming from a new generation, I mean, I didn't know him as a person. I didn't see most of his shows. I mean, today I see them in a video, but I mean, I only saw Requiem, which is quite different than the rest of what he did before. Me reading his text and thinking about new ways to present it, I never think of it as a cultural thing, and maybe that is because the type of person I am, or the type of the director I am, because yes, I grew up here, I'm Israeli, yes, I'm Jewish, but I'm not religious by any means, and I'm not a nationalist. I mean, I'm not, I don't try to present a specific Israeli language or theme in my work. And I think in that way, you can also see, if you go beyond knowing where Hanoch Levin came from and what was maybe his world in south of Tel Aviv and his ethnic background, Polish ethnic background. If you go beyond it, if you don't rely on it, then it's really fascinating and easy to see that his writing crosses boundaries. It crosses oceans and countries, and in that sense, when people like look at me and like in shock or surprise, how did you manage to direct Hanoch Levin in China? Did they understand it? And I think that experience, the first reading experience, really said it all. I mean, the whole idea, the whole concept of Eugenie, the producer, to bring it there. But once we were there, and we didn't really know, but we were there during the reading, and it's true what you say. I remember it. The cast, the Chinese cast was crying, and also you guys. And I think this thing about theater, bringing people together and bringing cultures together, his type of writing does that. And it's incredible. And it really was an honor to be that bridge between Israeli culture and Chinese culture, for that matter, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, thank you, Yair and Ronnie. Ari, I'd like to come to you and your recent production of Constant Mourner, first of all. I'll tell you that I was at the premiere in Tel Aviv in February, and I brought my sons, their girlfriends, my ex-wife, and her husband. And I want to thank you and Hanoch, but the two of you, for providing hours, not only in the theater, but afterwards, and for days afterwards, of heated discussion among us. How did you do what you did? Could you share it? And particularly, I hope you'll say something about the use of video, which was extraordinary. Coming from you, it's not such a surprise, but it was really an extraordinary experience in every sense.
First, lucky you that you could take your ex-wife with you to the theater with your kids and everything. I can't imagine that, and I have pretty good imagination. Obviously, when I came to the theater, I promised them I will not use video because I want to do it the real thing. And for me, it's very important to, before I even try, to find a setup of the world that the play or the script is taking place. And it took me a long time because I can't start working on the text before I have an image. And I was running images in my mind, and then I came with the designer I work with, David Polonsky, on all my films, to the idea of German expressionism from the beginning of the 20th century, Murnau, Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, bunch of films that were done between 1913 and 1920, 21. The biggest name coming out of this group is Fritz Lang, obviously. And then we said, okay, this is the setup of the play. The play tells the story of a king in a remote kingdom, in a castle. We don't know where it is. It's definitely not local or Israeli. It's very international. And it opens with the son of the king. The prince is dying, and the king does everything he can to change the desperate situation. He brings, obviously, doctors, magicians, believers, the religious priests, from whatever religious you want to place it. Nothing helps. And then in the second act, you understand that this is not his real boy, but he lost his boy 6 years ago. And every year on the date of the loss, in order to revive the feeling of Moore, he sacrifices another sporadic kid that is chosen by him to redo the drama of the last moments of the dying. This is hardcore content, you know, when you read it. I think I didn't understand in depth the play before I heard it from the actors. I had this obligation, which was in the beginning a tough boundary for me, from Lilian, Hanoch's wife, ex-wife, the widow of Hanoch. There are plenty, but she's the last one. That I'm not allowed to change one single word in the play, which for me as a filmmaker is kind of a really disaster, because once you start working with the actors, you know, it's different when it comes from them and you want to change. But then, now I think she did the right thing, but this is a different discussion. But in general, slowly, in order to revive the world of German expressionism, we needed to create a shadow theater and shadow filming in order to create the outside, because I wanted to give the perspective that there is a life outside of the castle, and this life is changing according to what is happening on the stage. And basically everything you saw, on the screens is dramatized super simple, with shadows. Nothing, there's no animation in it, no live action, just shadows and lights. And in order to connect the outside and the interior, which is the stage, we show also videos that we screened that collaborate with the back screening. It sounds complicated, but it gave the chance to extend the stage and bring the characters from the outside world on stage, as if it seems really natural. This was the artistic idea, mainly.
Yeah, wonderful.
Ben,
And
is it possible to show a clip from the play, from the production?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Oh.
It's probably not this one.
חנוך היה משתגע. דגל ישראל.
It's a promo. Yeah, promo looks pretty. I added big toys in the room of the prince, which are performed by dancers, 6 dancers, and later on one of the dancers would be sacrificed for the sake of the king, reviving, mooring from the original kid. So you just see here, I think it's the promo of the theater, unfortunately, but it is what it is. It was a fantastic, for me, it was a fantastic experience. I think when you make movies, the time you have to spend with actors is really minimal. Because when you go to the stage of co-production, basically at this stage of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you are seated and, terrible things are being thrown at you. Like, this actor quit, we don't have money to do this set, we can't shoot here, we don't even shoot there. And then in the afternoon, an actor comes in the room and say, okay, scene 83, you want to do it with him? Yeah, just place it. So you have like 1, 2, 3 hours a day max to work with actors. And here it was, for me, it was so lovely, going every day for 6, 7 hours in a closed room. This thing you build, the Camera 5 for rehearsals, bless you, Noam. And I felt really good and really concentrated, and it's very, very different than filmmaking. And I want to, if I can, remark about the discussion that you had before me. Look, I wanted to tell you, I'm not worried at all about Hanoch's work invading worldwide. I'm just saying.
I didn't say I'm worried.
No, you're preaching to the
Americans,
Americans,
but I didn't
Canadians.
say I'm worried. Hanoch will conquer.
He will conquer. First, I think the translations, I read what Jessica did.
Now it's the time of Jessica to penetrate.
Not Jessica, all of them, it's outstanding. Second, I think once, one good play, production, will invade in the right place, there will be a flood. Also, I think coming from a different world, when you look at theater world, this is the idea, right? These plays are timeless. They're timeless. They're doing Shakespeare, they're doing Godot, they're doing, each production is something new, something different.
Now it's the time.
And Hanoch will live forever. And,
For sure.
Once he has ground, once he has hold, he has ground, in England, I'm sure, in London, I'm sure this is going to happen very soon.
I believe so.
There will be many productions, and I'm not worried at all. What I do try to figure out, hearing you guys, I wanted to ask you and to ask Ronnie, why, and I know it from Lillian as well, why was he so against the idea of trying elsewhere? Was it fear that it will not succeed? Or was it real deep belief that the content and what he was writing was only rooted?
No, I'll tell you what is, in my opinion, because he was not, he was committed totally to the public in Israel. He wrote in Hebrew. He said, I don't want to waste my time and my energy and my power about translation and about transfer the production. But when I offered him a play reading of Murder at the National Theatre in London, he came with Lillian and he was in the audience and he responded in a press meeting. So he was not against, but he didn't want to put energy on it. He said, like he used to say, I'm doing, Ronnie will confirm because me and Ronnie were more or less the same age and we worked with Hanoch so many times and so wonderful events with him. He used to do one production in 1 year. He said, I'm working on a play for 1 year.
Yeah, but was it something ideological that he didn't want to...
No, nothing to do with the ideology. He said, if they want to do it, they should do it.
No,
I allow them. This is my opinion. I'm not... Ronnie?
Nothing to do with ideology. I think Hanoch was in a kind, even working with him, he was a kind of, without even declaring, he was a kind of a Zen person. We are now working on this sentence, we are dealing with this scene. He didn't believe in future programs. I mean, happenings, he knew he would not direct it. So if somebody else is directing, he doesn't care. He was concentrated on what he or us were doing at the moment.
Yeah.
Plans about directing in the National Theatre is just like useless and hopeless because he cares nothing about what would happen elsewhere. He was dealing with what he was doing at the moment, and it was fine.
All that may be true, but I'd like to add another element to that I think does have to do with translation, and I think this is a good opportunity to bring Jessica into the discussion. There are rumors about Hanoch not being pleased with having his words taken away from him. And Jessica and I, as translators, both know this. There are writers like this who can't bear to see their work move into another language because it's suddenly theirs but not theirs anymore. It's being shared with someone else. From certain stories I've heard about Hanoch and translation, I'd say he maybe falls into that camp. But Jessica, maybe you can talk to us a bit about what it was like, how you and I worked, and maybe a bit about why English, the English language, seems to be the last frontier for Hanoch's theater.
Yeah, well, I was first approached by Liliane Barreto, Hanoch's widow, several years ago about translating his plays, and I did not want to take it on at first. I translate fiction primarily, prose, mostly fiction, and that's where I am comfortable. And I didn't feel that I had enough knowledge of theater and how plays work to do this. I also felt that, given that Hanoch was and still is really Israel's greatest playwright, it would be a massive responsibility that I wasn't sure if I wanted to take on. So, to cut a long story short, we ended up doing it together, Evan and I. And Evan has more of an affinity with theater. He's written plays, he goes through a lot of plays, and it seemed like a good way to kind of each bring our own sensibilities into these works. And the way that we did it, which was not, it's not normally the way people co-translate. There are many co-translations, mostly poetry, some prose, a little bit of theater. But what we did was we insisted that this was not going to be, one of us translates and then the other reads and comments and revises. We needed to be physically in the same location, translating from scratch, from the first word of the play together. And that's what we did, which was a little bit of a challenge because we do not live on the same continent. but we made it work. And the result was that this was right from the beginning, not something that we looked at as a text, but as a performance. We spoke out loud every single word multiple times before we kind of committed it to paper or to screen. And for me in particular, not coming from that world of theater, that was probably the only way I could do it, because it really drove home for me how important the audio is. It's all what you're hearing, what the actors on stage are speaking, how they sound. There were many instances where something looked like it could work on paper, but when you spoke it out loud, we realized, something could be misunderstood and we needed to revise it accordingly. So that's how we worked on all these plays. And Ali spoke about the difference between making a film and directing a play. For me, I'm constantly comparing it to my experience of translating film. Fiction, there's a lot of kind of safety nets in the narrative where you can sneak in explanations for things that you simply don't have in a play. It is all what's coming out of the actors' mouths. That is it. There's nowhere to hide. So it was a big challenge, also quite exciting to kind of almost distill a work into just these words that the characters are speaking. Some similarities with fiction, at least a lot of the Israeli writing that I translate, one of the characteristics is this huge range, this kind of almost jarring back and forth between registers, between very low register, really colloquial kind of street talk, and then in the middle of that sometimes, really high poetic, even biblical language. That's something that quite a few Israeli writers use, and it's often the way Israelis speak as well, even still today. And Hanoch is kind of a master of that too. And these swings, and in many ways, not just in the language, but also in the mood, the swings and the huge range were something that I think Evan and I, even being quite familiar with these works, were often kind of shocked by. And that's, as you saw in the clip we watched before, that's really one of the things he was out to do. He wanted to shock his audiences. He wanted to make them uncomfortable, and he certainly did that. And we would often have moments when we were translating where, the scene would kind of be going along and we'd be lulled into thinking, okay, we know what this is. We know what the atmosphere is. And then all of a sudden, boom, no, this is not what you think it is. You may think this is a funny play. You may think this is a comedy, but, when I have you laughing, that's when I'm going to throw something at you that is political or tragic. All of a sudden death comes in the middle of the joke. And I think, talking about why his plays have not really succeeded or been exposed much in the English-speaking world, I think that's one of the issues. And I've seen this a lot with the novels that I translate. American audiences in particular, British slightly less, they don't really know what to do with a work that doesn't fit neatly into one category. So with books, they want to know what shelf to put it on. Is this serious? Is this fiction or nonfiction? Is this serious or funny? Is this historical or not? And to come and say, well, this is nothing, it doesn't fit neatly into any category. They don't quite know what to do with it. And I think that's also true with theater. People, I think American audiences want to know, am I going out for an evening at the theater to be entertained and amused, and am I going to laugh or not? And that's the choice I want to make. And you can't make that choice with Levin's plays because it's everything. It's all together all at the same time. And even within each play, each monologue, each dialogue, each conversation, people speak the way I think we all think, right? So many of us may be having a very highly, you're having a cultured conversation with your friends about philosophy, but in the middle, this thought about what am I going to have for dinner pops into your head, right? But in our refined kind of cultures, we've learned to sublimate those thoughts and not mention them. Not so on the stage with Levin. Any thought that pops into a character's head, whether it's, appropriate or not, will come out of their mouths. And it's kind of all there all the time. It's funny, it's tragic, it's death, it's life, it's love, it's sex, it's food, it's everything. And that, I think, is very true to life, particularly Israeli life, but really all life. And I think it does make it a little hard to stomach for theater goers who are used to more of a neatly classified type of work.
Jessica, I'd like to add one thing about our work together, which was one of the most extraordinary experiences I've had in my life as a translator. Because, I mean, for those of you who aren't engaged in translation, you can imagine it's a very lonely profession most of the time, where you're sitting and working on a text by yourself. And here, the two of us were together, uttering every word that we were reading and then reproducing in English. And somebody mentioned earlier, you know, Ari mentioned that he was not allowed to change any of the words when he was producing The Constant Mourner. And in a sense, we as translators are trying not to change any of the words, and yet we're changing every single word. But one of the most interesting experiences I remember of our work together was when we finished our work, and this was two translation brains working on these plays together. Oftentimes we would consult with people who had been involved with Hanoch on the productions. We tried to get our hands on, and we're pretty successful in finding filmed versions of those plays that we were translating, but specifically ones that had been directed by Hanoch, so that we could see exactly what he was talking about. And I would say that in each of the plays, there were maybe one or two, maybe three lines at which, when they were uttered, as we were watching them, Jessica and I looked at each other and said, oh, that's what he meant by that line. It was often an innocuous little sentence that might have been interpreted two or three different ways, but then the interpretation we saw was the fourth way. And so it was fascinating for us to be able to see, you know, as translators, that brought us even that much closer to what his intention was, both because we could see it in the text and because we could see it in his directing. I think this is a good opportunity now to
Can I
relate
add
to
something? Even can I add something?
Sure.
I was privileged or lucky, I don't know how to put it, but working with Hanoch, I got quite often his own texts when he was still writing. So he would send me a play, and I could see parallel to the line other words that he was still thinking of replacing them. So I still got some texts which were the unfinished texts with the possibilities for a single word to replace a word in the line. He would never discuss it with me, of course, because there was a complete separation between the writer and the director. So no discussion was about the writing. But I could see how much a single word could mean for him, whether to choose this one or the other, and which I really support what you said and Jessica said. On the other hand, I think we were working on Requiem in China. I knew nothing about Chinese, but so I asked our producer to give me a peep into the translation, and I asked her few idioms, few words to understand how they were translated. For instance, one of the whores in Requiem is mentioning that she's snotting. She's the two whores are talking, and one is said, "Where did you read it?" She said, "I read it on a journal." So I asked the producer, our producer, "So how do you translate journal into Chinese?" She said, "A magazine." I said, "No, magazine is not journal. When you say journal, you had a whole connotation of a character. Magazine is not journal." So when you translate a text, and my mother was a translator, so I know it very well, you can never really get the exact quality. But on the other hand, you get other qualities instead of what you've missed. I would say that, I would dare to say that Hanoch didn't care about translating because he knew he wouldn't be able to control. And once he gave it away, it was not his. The same with his productions, because some of his works were directed by other directors. I was lucky to work with another director on a play by Hanoch. Hanoch would never interfere during the rehearsals. He would come at the end for the opening night. He would give me a chocolate and say, thank you, and would go away. And that would be all. He would never interfere in somebody else's work. And I think that was the reason why translating his own language, his own text into another language was somebody else's work. That's why he didn't want to deal with it.
Only add about translating that Jessica translated all my films, even those who were made in English. And I have to tell you that when I read her translation, I always say, wow, who wrote that? I don't believe I wrote it, you know? It's much better than the original. I don't know what Hanoch would have felt, but for me, Jesus. So.
Jessica, put that over your workspace. Just hang it over your workspace and remind yourself every day of that. That's
true.
That's very nice to hear. But I will say, one of the things I was going to mention before is that for me, at least, I don't often translate writers who are no longer with us, and it's a very difficult experience. I'm used to being able to email my author and say, what exactly did you mean here? Or, do you think this is this or that? Or not being able to do that. As Evan mentioned, we did have access to some really helpful people who worked with him, editors, other people in the world of theater who helped us out with specific issues. But it's a different relationship with the text because it's unmediated, because you don't have access to the author, or in this case, the playwright. And particularly, as Evan also alluded to before, because we knew that he had not really enjoyed the process of having his plays translated before, and some of the English translations that did exist were overly literal, and that was because he was somewhat involved in it and could not let the plays go enough to have them translated. And there is, a good translation does take quite a bit of liberties in order to make it work in the other language, and I think he wasn't really able to let that happen while he was alive. So although, I'm sad that I didn't have the opportunity to actually work with him, it did give us freedom that we probably would not have otherwise had.
If I might just say one word, is that text is very crucial in theater, but these are just the lines. Yair and me and Ari would add, I'm sure, that based on the text, you create another language, which is a complete other word. It's light and color and movement and acting. And so the language itself in a play is not by its own. It's a key, but it's supported by so many other aspects. It's not like literature. It doesn't stand by itself. It's one component of a complete language. And I just wanted to add this aspect.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions from the audience. One of them we've pretty much covered about translation, and thank you for that one. But I'd like to go to the other question right now, and this is really open to all of you. Don't you think that all of this is unstageable, all this unspeakable pain? I cannot imagine any show that gets only close to all these human catastrophes. This is from Nathalie. We did The Child Dreams, and I constantly had the feeling that I am betraying people that really lost loved ones, that suffered in the Holocaust, that saw people dying in their arms, because I am acting as if I knew their pain. Of course, I do this in other plays too, but never in this dimension. Wow.
Shall we mention Medea?
Sorry?
Shall we mention Medea, for instance?
Oh.
What you do with Medea, what you do with the classics, the pain. It's poetry. With poetry, you can express everything.
Also, Ronnie, I think maybe I can add, because yes, you're right about Medea and about the Greek tragedies, and I think, you also mentioned his adaptation of The Lost Women of Troy, or The Trojan Women by Euripides. He had his own version, The Lost Women of Troy. I think what Levin did with his plays, which to me is always a huge challenge, it's like the way he's writing, it's so acrobatic in some sense. He is really bouncing from one genre to another, so he can write really horrifying situations, and the next moment it could be just really funny or really, really beautiful and poetic. So I think also it's a way of realizing, okay, this is life. Life could be really painful, but at the same time, I think it depends on how you address it. And I think most of his plays are beyond just tragedies. Even his difficult ones, like A Child's Dream, there are moments of joy and compassion and love and many other feelings and emotions. And for me, it's always like a huge question: how do you bounce from one thing to another? Can one digest it? And I think I heard Lilian say this once, that he had this gift, one eye, when you watch, as an audience, when you watch Hanoch Levin's show, one eye is laughing and the other one is crying. And I think that's the essence of, or at least one of the essences he had as a writer, to really, like, I don't know, it's like he was waiting for you around the corner and you didn't know what was coming next. So I understand the question, because it is sometimes it can feel like it's too much, but the next moment could be the exact opposite. Sorry for interfering, Ronnie.
No, on the contrary, I think I would add that Hanoch as a director would combine both the horror with the beauty. The beauty would be on stage, the horror would be in the words and the deeds, the action. And both would create the pathos, the great pathos of those dramatic productions. The combination of amazing beauty on the stage, achieved by designers like Ruti Dar, who was his companion for many years and created so many productions with him. You would go to see Iyov, and the beauty on the stage is fascinating, and at the same moment, the words, the lines are full of horror. And this combination was striking.
We only have a few minutes left, and unfortunately that doesn't give us enough time to get to some of the other materials we had, which I hope will be made available to viewers here afterward, if possible, if not directly from this festival, and perhaps from the association itself, from the but really a couple of fine clips about different productions that have taken place around the world. We're going to end with one trailer from one of those, a Swiss-Belgian production of A Winter's Funeral. But before that, I would just like to mention a few things. First, that tomorrow, there are several panels still to be held at 2 o'clock, Embodying Meaning, Let's Play It by Gender, and at 4 o'clock, From Page to Stage. I also want to thank all of the people behind the scenes who were making this possible and making it easy for people like me who feel challenged by all of this technology. Ben, Nathan, Chen, and the amazing Roy Horowitz, who pulls all of this together. And mostly I want to thank all of you. You've been amazing, and I think it's clear to me, and it's probably clear to all the audience, that we could have continued for another few hours and really only gotten started. There's so much here. Noam, you mentioned the number of plays. There are actually 60 or 61 plays, something like that, and fully 25 of them have never even been produced before, and were many were only discovered at the end of Hanoch's life when he was working with his editors in getting the plays their best condition and in order to anthologize them. And so there's still so much opportunity to produce the plays that have been successfully produced in Israel and around the world, and those that have never been produced anywhere. And as has been mentioned here, more and more translations of those plays in almost 25 languages are coming out all the time. So we can only hope that the trend will continue. And as several people mentioned this evening, that there will be many, many more opportunities for Hanoch Levin to, how did you put it? Conquer the world. Thank you again, and good wishes to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
C'est que maman est quand même morte.
C'est le globe terrestre que je palpe. L'Amérique, le Grand Sud, les Alpes.
J'ai ni les Alpes, ni l'Amérique, ni rien qui soit très exotique. J'ai juste une robe un peu fondue, et sous ma robe il n'y a qu'un cul.
Rien qu'avec le jogging d'aujourd'hui, vous gagnez une semaine de vie.
Alors quoi? Vous préférez mourir 10 ans plus tôt? Alors tant pis pour vous.
Moi j'ai toutes les nuits dans les mains ce à quoi les autres hommes rêvent en vain.
Quand accepterez-vous de savoir que maman est morte?
Je vais m'exprimer librement et en toute sincérité. Parce que tout ce que nous disons en ce moment est off the record. Et qu'officiellement, je ne suis pas au courant de la mort de ta mère.
Wait, we're back. One last clip for you. It's a shame to miss it. So here it is, Hanoch Levin around the world. Enjoy, and thanks again for being part of this.
Debajo de mi cinturón brota un culón soberbio, dos bolas carnosas, rosado color, un surco fino en medio, de siempre me sigue oculto detrás y donde quiera que vaya me agarra, me arrastra, mi pompis tira de mí, mi pompis siempre está ahí. De niña soñaba al cielo ascender, montada en un pentagrama. Volar siempre ha sido mi gran ambición, pero sigo a una silla atada. Del piano solo sube mi alegre canción, y donde quiera que vaya